Once we have our center front panel done, we can go ahead and start on our side front panel. So I'll peel my center front panel away from the princess seam so that I can access it. And then I will place my side front princess panel so that, tape measure, the green line is centered on my waistline. So I think I'll just put a little pin there for placement. Let's see. This is the tiniest pin head I have. Maybe I'll use the ball head. Okay, so about halfway between my princess seam and side seam here. And then about halfway between my side seam and princess seam under the bust. And then about halfway between my side seam and princess seam around, let's see, I'll go maybe 2 inches below the waist, somewhere around there. So these pins are something like 2 inches apart. And so halfway between my side seam and my princess seam, about 2 inches below the waist, I'll put a pin. And then I'll go about 2 inches down. And put a pin halfway between. And if you're not sure what you can do, like what half is, you can just take your tape measure and fold it in half, like the measurement between like the side seam and the princess seam. And then once you fold it in half, you can use that to figure out where your pin should go. So this side piece doesn't have any straight edges, so we need to figure out where our green line is going to go. So we're just giving ourselves some guide marks. So I'll fold that in half. And then stick a pin. Okay, so this is where I'm going to align my green line with this row of pins that I've placed. So let's test that out and see how that goes. So I want to make sure that I have, lower her, I have enough extra to go so there's my shoulder and princess seam intersection. I want to make sure I have a couple of inches past that. So I don't want to let this slip. I want to make sure I have a couple of inches past that intersection. So I'll kind of keep my fingers up here as I go down here and find those pins that I placed. So there's one. So I can put this here just to hold it so it doesn't slip. And then I'll put a pin here. and then center this grain line over that pin that I placed, and then just put a little pin there to hold it in place. Center that grain line, put a little pin to hold it in place. Center that grain line. I'm going to have to release these, but for now this is just going to help me keep my piece on the grain. So put that there. Okay, so now my piece is centered and on grain. So next what I'm going to do is I'm going to drape the princess bodice section, and I'm going to put an ease tuck around the armscye, and I'm going to mark the ease to cup over the bust. So it'll be about, so yeah, on the front we had 2 inches above and below the apex. On the side it'll be about maybe 2 1/8 or 2 1/4 above and below, so that we can ease this. So let's just start smoothing this and marking. So I have the grain line aligned below the bust point, but above I'm just going to smooth it. And so I'm going to find my mid-arm hole, and I'm going to put a little ease tuck. Smaller pins are better for this, for your little tiny, teeny tiny ease tuck. And then just smooth this up and over. And then I'll stick a pin at the princess seam intersection. And then I'll come over here and mark the apex. So mark the apex, and then I'll find my little ruler and I'll mark. I'm going to double check the book because I think it's 2 1/4. So the book says not much about it. So I'm going to recommend we go about 2 1/8 above the apex and 2 1/8 below the apex. So we have a total of 1/4 inch ease. And then we'll mark our princess seam shoulder intersection. So I'll move this pin out of the way so that I can get in there. So there's my shoulder seam. And there's my princess. And then I'll come out along the shoulder seam and find my shoulder tip. So I might need to just take a peek under here because I'm having trouble feeling that shoulder seam. So make a little T. So now I have my shoulder seam marked. I can mark my ridge, but I'll probably use my basic block armhole. Okay, and this is shifting a little bit. So let me start pinning close to my princess seam, just so that it doesn't shift. And then I'll pin near my side seam. I'll just make sure that I'm smoothing this up. Smooth this over. Time to raise this up so you can see a little better. Okay, so I'm going to start dotting my princess seam. And then 2 1/8 above my apex. And then here I'll probably need to do a little clipping. To help me get around these curves. So I have fingers on the princess seam so that I didn't clip past the princess seam. And you can see here, there starts to form this little bubble over the apex. That's okay, we want that. That little bubble should probably be about 1/4 of an inch. Good. Okay. So now I'll make a mark at princess seam and waist tape. And then at princess seam below the waist tape. And then smooth it over the hip. I'm going to go ahead and put a pin there. So now I'm going to need some more clipping. So I'll just put my finger on the princess seam so that I don't clip past it. And then some of the weight of this is pushing down. So I'm going to trim some of this away. And then continue marking. So now that I did some clipping, I'm going to double check. Yep, still on target there. Yep. So again, your dress form may be very curvy, like mine is, and your muslin is pretty stable, and so it is fighting you a little bit. But that's why we have the truing process. So now I'm marking the bottom of the HBL and the princess seam. Let me move this up so you can see. There we go. So I'm just feeling for the princess seam, and I can put some more pins here. So just dotting the princess seam. Okay, so now I'm going to go back up to the waist. I'm going to pinch that 1/4 of an inch ease in the waist. So it's an 1/8 of an inch pinch, a teeny tiny little pinch. And then at my HBL, I'm going to mark the bottom of the HBL tape and the side seam. I can mark the top too. And then find my ruler. I want to go out a 1/2 inch for my ease at the HBL. Make a little line there. And then I'll mark my waist. So it feels like I'm going to need to clip some more. So I'll mark my bottom of the waist tape, side seam, just for funsies. I'll also mark my side seam in the top. And then I'll come over here and find my armhole pin and mark my side seam and my drop armhole. And then from my armhole side seam, I'm going to go out a 1/2 for ease. It's kind of hard to draw on a dress form, but let me see. I left my short ruler not within reach, so I'll try and use this long one. So I'm going to want to connect from my mark at my waist. Oh, that's too tall for you to see. So this is my drop armhole pin at my side seam, and I measured out a 1/2 an inch. So I'm going to want to connect from that 1/2 inch out to my waist tape because I've pinched my ease here. So here I drew it, here I pinched it. So when my side seam connects from my ease at the underarm to the waist, and then my hip is gonna shift. So now I have to move this up for you. My hip is gonna shift. So that 1/2 inch ease is inside or on the side seam. And then whatever this distance is here, I can either measure it from the grain line to the ease, or I can measure it at the HBL from the princess seam, that all the way out to the ease. That distance is going to be the same when I true this all the way down. So I think I have everything I need. I can make some more marks for my armhole. So I can mark my armhole pin, and I can mark the plate if I want, but like I said, I'm probably going to use my basic block armhole that I worked on. So now I have my side front ready to go. And now I can go ahead and pin these two together to see what they look like. So we'll take an image of that next.